Social drinking has always been part of our culture, but for some, alcohol is the root of all evil in society.
Couple of jiggers of moonlight and add a star.
Pour in the blue of a June night and one guitar.
Mix in a couple of dreamers, there you are. Lovers hail, the moonlight cocktail.
And I don't see how anyone who knows and understands all the facts can condone the use of alcohol.
The debate over booze heated up as the Industrial Revolution picked up steam and alcohol became more readily available. Drinking in America reached its peak during the 1800s, and Maine's largest city, Portland, was no exception. The evils of alcohol made an impression on one young man. He was raised by Quaker parents, but his commitment to that faith didn't last. He refused to renounce fighting, believing violence was okay if the cause was worthy. That man was Neal Dow, and the crusade he fought was prohibition of alcohol.
There were over 300 places in the city that you could purchase alcohol. How could there be 300 places? There couldn't be 300 bars. We're a small city. There couldn't have been that many. It turned out that every establishment, shoe shop, haircut, meat market, candle shop, every establishment had a barrel of rum in front of it that you could pay a couple pittance for, or a nickel, and you get yourself a dipper of rum. Neal Dow would see children drunk on the street, children drunk in the alleyways. So much alcohol in these barrels around the street that little kids could run around and sneak a dipper and run away. And they could go down here and sneak another dipper and run away. Well, imagine sneaking 4, 5, 6 dipperfuls of rum as a child, 8, 10, 12 years old. Doesn't take too much. And pretty soon you're going to be falling down drunk.
The drunken children, in many cases, simply emulated their fathers. The wives and mothers, who so desperately wanted to solve this problem, approached local leader Neal Dow, who sympathized with their plight.
And women after women coming to him with horror stories about being thrown out of their homes, and no food, no money, no clothing for the children, saying, "My husband has drunk up all the money. We can't pay the rent. We have no food."
What's important about Dow is he's a local guy who starts a local idea of temperance and prohibition and sets it out into a statewide movement, and then a regional movement, and then a national movement.
It was clear to Dow that ranting against demon rum had little effect. Any meaningful change had to happen through legislation. Dow started down this path in 1837, taking on one of the state's most prominent citizens, former Governor William King and his Maine Temperance Society. King's group advocated moderation, while Dow preached against all drinking. He formed a new, more powerful temperance union. Soon, it overshadowed King's group.
The root problem of all social ills was alcohol, according to Neal Dow. And if you took that away, you'd have some kind of utopian society.
This victory propelled Dow into state politics, where he lobbied for legislation limiting Mainers' access to liquor. Dow made history in 1851 when he was elected mayor of Portland while helping to pass the Maine Law, so called because this law was the first in the nation to ban alcohol.
Was a law that banned drinking alcohol for frivolous purposes. You could drink it for medical and mechanical purposes. Most Mainers weren't very happy with that. You could actually make anything you wanted to. You just couldn't sell it for recreational purposes. But who was to say what recreational purposes were? That, unfortunately, was such a vague law that people were drinking it. They would say, "My engine needs oiling," ha ha ha.
As quickly as Neal Dow's political career rose, it came crashing down. During his second term as mayor, in 1855, constituents called Dow's anti-alcohol motives into question.
In 1855, there was a rumor going around that Neal Dow, who was mayor of Portland at the time, was keeping liquor in the city hall basement. And he was. It was being sold for medicinal purposes. A great mob assembled. This was in Monument Square. It was then called Market Square. And Dow became frightened. He called out the militia. The militia fired into a crowd, wounded 7 people, killed 1. There were calls to hang Neal Dow the next day. There was a great flap over it, and eventually he lost his political clout over this. People don't like to be told. People don't like to be pushed around by government. So that was a problem that Neal Dow ran up against. But he never really lost his popularity among certain groups. But the rum riot was a major blow to his political aspirations, I think.
The bad publicity brought on by the rum riots did nothing to change Dow's beliefs. He continued to preach the evils of alcohol in any setting he could. In the 1860s, that setting became the southern battlefields of the Civil War.
Neal Dow couldn't even fathom the idea of slavery. He hated it. So when Civil War came along, he joined. He was a Quaker. He was raised a Quaker. He never fought in a battle or anything. This is why it was so surprising to his family when he did join. At 57 years old, he joins the Civil War. Today, you're almost retiring at that time. He's joining.
Again, he was trying to promote temperance, and he had a temperance regiment. Not everybody liked him outside of the regiment. He was not a very popular general in some quarters.
Most mothers wanted their children under his command. No carousing, no rabble-rousing out there or out drinking. They knew this. There was a code of ethics that you were going to uphold if you were under his command. And if you did not, you were going to know about it. You were going to act like a gentleman. You were going to act like a man should act, respectful, dedicated. This is what you did when you were under his command.
After the war, General Dow returned to Maine, where the ban on alcohol remained in effect. The Napoleon of Temperance, as he was known, joined forces with a women's religious group to push for national prohibition.
After the Civil War, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, Frances Willard and our own Lillian Stevens, took over nationally, and Neal Dow became a kind of icon. He wasn't so much involved himself, he was a speaker, but the women took over and very much got behind this national movement. He brings this kind of image. He seems like a sane and nice man, and he brings that to them at a time when I think they need a kind of masculine touch, but not masculine control.
For close to 50 years, Maine remained dry, with several states joining the noble experiment along the way. Neal Dow died in 1897, believing he was leading the charge for an alcohol reform revolution. The WCTU and other groups carried on Dow's fight, and 22 years later, his dream of national prohibition was realized. The 18th Amendment to the Constitution and the Volstead Act both passed in 1919, criminalized drinking in America, but not without some unintended consequences. Gang violence, the emergence of organized crime, tax evasion, and other problems deemed more serious than alcohol prevention forced the repeal of Prohibition in 1933. Maine also legalized alcohol at this time. But Dow's legacy lives on. His estate was left to the Women's Christian Temperance Union, which maintains the Neal Dow Memorial today. From here, the fight against the evils of alcohol continues.
Knowing he was turning it over to the Women's Christian Temperance Union, that these people were going to carry on his legacy of prohibition and against alcohol, I think they just wanted to keep it as complete as possible to try to keep this ideal carried on.